Welcome, friend, to this peaceful journey through time, where we'll explore the rise of stone fortresses and the birth of a social order that would shape Europe for centuries. Tonight, we're traveling back to an age when mighty walls rose from rolling hills, and power was measured not in gold alone, but in the strength of your stronghold and the loyalty of those who served beneath your banner. Whether you're settling in for sleep or simply seeking to slow the pace of your evening, I'm grateful you're here with me. Picture yourself standing on a windswept hill in the year 1067. Just 1 year after the Norman conquest has forever changed the landscape of England. The morning mist clings to the valley below as you watch dozens of workers hauling massive stones up the muddy slope. Their breath forms small clouds in the crisp autumn air as they labour under the watchful eye of a master mason whose calloused hands have shaped fortifications across 3 kingdoms. This is not some distant fairy tale or romantic notion of medieval life. This is the raw reality of castle construction in an age when survival depended on your ability to build walls thick enough to withstand siege engines and high enough to spot enemy riders while they were still miles away. The workers you see before you are not volunteers. They are peasants fulfilling their feudal obligations, carpenters and stonemasons whose skills have been commandeered by their new Norman lord, and prisoners of war whose labour now serves to strengthen the very system that conquered them. The overseer of this massive undertaking is Sir Geoffrey de Montfort, a knight who earned his lands through valour at the Battle of Hastings. His weathered face bears the scars of countless battles, and his keen eyes miss nothing as he surveys the progress of what will become one of the most formidable fortresses in northern England. Geoffrey understands something that many of his contemporaries do not. In this new world order, stone speaks louder than steel, and a well-positioned castle can control more territory than 100 mounted knights. As dawn breaks fully over the construction site, Geoffrey makes his daily inspection of the work. He begins at the foundation, where massive blocks of limestone have been carefully fitted together without mortar, their weight alone sufficient to anchor the structure for centuries to come. The foundation stones are not merely large, they are enormous. Each block weighs nearly 2 tons and required teams of oxen and dozens of men to position correctly. The precision of their placement would impress modern engineers, yet these medieval builders accomplished this feat using nothing more than wooden levers, rope pulleys, and an intimate understanding of physics passed down through generations of craftsmen. Moving upward from the foundation, Geoffrey examines the rising walls that will form the keep, the heart of his future castle. These walls are not simple barriers. They are complex defensive structures designed with centuries of siege warfare experience built into every stone. The exterior face presents a smooth, steep surface that will prove nearly impossible for attacking forces to scale. Hidden within the wall's thickness are murder holes through which defenders can rain arrows, boiling oil, or stones upon anyone foolish enough to approach the base of the keep. The thickness of these walls tells its own story about the nature of medieval warfare. At their base, the walls measure 12 feet thick, gradually tapering to 8 feet at the top. This enormous mass of stone can absorb the impact of trebuchet stones weighing 300 pounds or more. The walls are not solid throughout, but contain internal passages that allow defenders to move unseen from one section of the fortification to another. These hidden corridors also serve a more sinister purpose, providing routes for surprise attacks against enemies who might breach the outer defences. As Geoffrey continues his inspection, he pauses to speak with Master William, the chief mason overseeing the stonework. William has spent 3 decades perfecting his craft, working on cathedral construction in Normandy before being recruited for this castle project. His skilled hands can judge the quality of stone with a touch, and his experienced eye can spot potential weaknesses in wall construction that might not become apparent for years. The conversation between the knight and the mason reveals the complex relationship between military necessity and architectural innovation that drives castle development. Master William explains that the keep's design incorporates lessons learned from recent sieges across Normandy and England. The entrance to the keep is positioned on the 2nd floor, accessible only by a wooden staircase that can be destroyed in moments if enemies breach the outer defences. The ground floor contains storage rooms for food, weapons and water supplies that could sustain a garrison for months during a prolonged siege. Above the entrance level, the keep will house the Lord's private chambers, a great hall for entertaining guests and conducting the business of governance, and sleeping quarters for household knights and servants. The Great Hall deserves special attention because it represents the social and political heart of the feudal system taking root across England. This vast room, measuring 40 feet long and 20 feet wide, serves multiple purposes that reflect the complex nature of medieval lordship. During peacetime, the hall functions as a court where Geoffrey will settle disputes among his tenants, receive tribute from his vassals, and conduct negotiations with other lords. The physical arrangement of the hall reinforces social hierarchies, with Geoffrey's chair positioned on a raised platform at one end, his most trusted knights seated at tables arranged according to their rank and status, and lesser nobles and wealthy merchants occupying positions that clearly indicate their place in the feudal order. But the Great Hall also serves crucial military functions that become apparent when you understand how medieval warfare actually operated. The hall can accommodate 60 fully armed knights for strategy meetings before major campaigns. Its large hearth provides warmth during winter months, when the castle must house additional troops called up for military service. Most importantly, the hall's elevated position within the keep offers commanding views of the surrounding countryside, allowing Geoffrey and his military advisors to observe approaching armies, while they are still hours away from reaching the castle's outer defences. As construction continues throughout the day, the division of labour reveals the social structure that castles both symbolise and enforce. The skilled stonemasons and carpenters work under Master William's direct supervision, their expertise commanding respect and relatively generous compensation. These craftsmen have travelled hundreds of miles to work on this project, following a circuit of castle construction that will keep them employed for decades as Norman lords establish their authority throughout England. Below the skilled craftsmen in the construction hierarchy are the general labourers, mostly local peasants fulfilling their feudal obligations to their new lord. These men spend their days hauling stones, mixing mortar, and performing the backbreaking work that makes the mason's artistry possible. They receive no monetary payment for their labour, but their service earns them Geoffrey's protection and the right to farm small plots of land within his territory. This arrangement might seem exploitative to modern eyes, but in an age of constant warfare and economic uncertainty, the security provided by feudal bonds often meant the difference between survival and starvation. The most intriguing figures on the construction site are the prisoners of war, Saxon nobles who chose to submit to Norman rule rather than face execution or exile. These men possess military knowledge and leadership experience that makes them valuable additions to Geoffrey's household. But their loyalty remains questionable. They work alongside peasants during the day, their noble birth providing no exemption from manual labour. Yet Geoffrey consults with them privately about defensive strategies and local political conditions. Their integration into the construction project reflects the pragmatic flexibility that characterises successful Norman colonisation of England. As afternoon shadows lengthen across the construction site, Geoffrey turns his attention to the castle's water supply, perhaps the most critical element of any successful fortification. Medieval sieges were wars of attrition, with victory often going to whichever side could maintain adequate food and water supplies longer. The castle's well has been dug 60 feet into the bedrock, deep enough to reach water sources that cannot be poisoned or diverted by besieging armies. The well shaft is lined with carefully fitted stones and equipped with a windlass system that allows defenders to draw water even while under arrow fire from attacking forces. The castle's food storage capabilities reveal equally sophisticated planning for extended sieges. The ground floor of the keep contains granaries designed to hold enough wheat, barley and oats to feed 200 people for 6 months. Adjoining chambers house preserved meats, dried vegetables, and wheels of cheese aged in caves throughout Geoffrey's territory. These food supplies represent not just military necessity, but also the agricultural productivity that makes the feudal system economically viable. The peasants who labour on castle construction also tend the fields that produce the surplus crops necessary to sustain both the castle's garrison and the broader population during times of crisis. The economic implications of castle construction extend far beyond the immediate building project. Geoffrey's decision to build this particular castle in this specific location reflects careful analysis of trade routes, agricultural potential, and strategic military considerations. The castle's position commands a river crossing that merchants must use to transport goods between major English cities. Geoffrey will collect tolls from these merchants, generating revenue that helps finance not only the castle's construction, but also the military equipment and trained soldiers necessary to defend his territory. The river crossing also provides access to water transportation, allowing Geoffrey to move bulk goods more efficiently than would be possible using only roads. Medieval roads were primitive by modern standards, often impassable during winter months and vulnerable to bandit attacks throughout the year. The river offers a more secure and efficient means of transporting the grain, wool, and other products that form the economic foundation of Geoffrey's lordship. As evening approaches and work begins to slow, Geoffrey meets with his household steward to review the day's progress and plan tomorrow's activities. The steward, a literate man who keeps detailed records of expenses and labour allocation, reports that construction remains on schedule despite recent delays caused by late stone deliveries from the quarry. The conversation reveals the complex logistical challenges involved in medieval construction projects, from coordinating the work of dozens of specialised craftsmen to managing supply chains that stretch across hundreds of miles of dangerous territory. Tomorrow will bring new challenges as work begins on the castle's outer defensive walls, a project that will require even more workers and materials than the keep construction. These outer walls will eventually encompass several acres, creating a defended courtyard large enough to shelter livestock, store siege engines, and house the temporary buildings needed to support military campaigns. The outer walls represent a different type of defensive thinking, designed not just to protect the keep, but to create a miniature fortress city capable of sustaining itself during extended periods of conflict. The day's work concludes as darkness falls, and the workers return to their temporary shelters scattered around the construction site. Geoffrey makes one final inspection of the day's progress before retiring to his own quarters, a modest wooden structure that will serve as his residence until the castle's completion. Even in these temporary accommodations, the social hierarchies of feudal society remain clearly defined, with Geoffrey's quarters elevated above those of his knights, who in turn occupy better housing than the craftsmen and labourers who make the entire project possible. As the first stars appear in the darkening sky, Geoffrey's thoughts turn to the broader implications of what he is creating here. This castle represents more than stone and mortar. It is a physical manifestation of the new order spreading across England, a system where power flows downward from king to baron to knight to peasant, in carefully defined relationships of obligation and protection. Each stone laid today strengthens not just these walls, but the entire feudal structure that will govern European society for centuries to come. The morning of the following day brings unexpected visitors to the construction site. A small party of riders approaches from the east, their banners identifying them as representatives of Earl Robert de Beaumont, one of William the Conqueror's most trusted advisors. The Earl himself rides at the head of the group, his presence immediately commanding the attention of everyone on the construction site. Workers pause in their labours to observe this powerful nobleman whose decisions can affect the fate of entire regions. Earl Robert's visit is not ceremonial. He has come to inspect Geoffrey's progress and evaluate whether this castle will adequately serve the strategic needs of Norman rule in this region. The Earl's trained eye examines every aspect of the fortification, from the quality of the stonework to the positioning of defensive features. His questions reveal a deep understanding of siege warfare and military engineering that comes from decades of experience in establishing Norman control over conquered territories. The conversation between Geoffrey and Earl Robert takes place in the partially completed Great Hall, where rough wooden benches serve as temporary furniture and unfinished stone walls echo their voices. The Earl's primary concern is not the castle's ability to withstand siege, which he considers adequate, but rather its capacity to project Norman power throughout the surrounding countryside. A castle's true strength lies not just in its walls, but in its ability to dominate the economic and political life of its region. Earl Robert examines Geoffrey's plans for the castle's economic functions with particular interest. The proposed market square within the outer walls will generate revenue through merchant fees and taxes, while also ensuring that local trade remains under Norman control. The castle's position overlooking the river crossing allows Geoffrey to regulate commerce and collect tolls that will fund military operations throughout the region. These economic considerations are as important as defensive capabilities in determining whether a castle successfully serves Norman strategic objectives. The Earl's inspection reveals aspects of castle design that casual observers might overlook. The gatehouse, still under construction, incorporates sophisticated defensive features, including multiple portcullises, murder holes positioned to catch attackers in crossfire, and a complex series of chambers that force invaders to navigate narrow passages while under constant attack from hidden defenders. But the gatehouse also serves administrative functions, housing the castle's records, treasury, and the quarters for the constable who manages daily operations when Geoffrey is absent on military campaigns. During his visit, Earl Robert meets with Master William to discuss innovations in castle design that are being implemented across Norman England. The Master Mason describes new techniques for creating stronger mortar that will better withstand the freeze-thaw cycles of English winters. He explains improvements in foundation construction that prevent undermining, a common siege tactic where attackers dig tunnels beneath castle walls to collapse defensive structures. These technical discussions reveal how castle building has become a rapidly evolving science, with lessons learned from each siege contributing to improvements in future fortifications. The afternoon brings a demonstration of the castle's defensive capabilities as they currently exist. Geoffrey orders his household knights to conduct a mock assault on the partially completed keep, providing Earl Robert with a realistic assessment of the fortification's strengths and potential weaknesses. The exercise reveals both the effectiveness of the defensive design and areas where modifications might improve the castle's ability to withstand determined attackers. The mock assault begins with knights attempting to scale the keep's walls using ladders and grappling hooks. The steep angle of the walls and the height of the structure make this approach nearly impossible, even without defenders actively repelling the attack. Arrows fired from the keep's narrow windows can cover every approach route, creating overlapping fields of fire that would devastate any real assault force. The exercise demonstrates why castle sieges typically relied on starvation and attrition rather than direct assault against well-designed fortifications. Earl Robert observes the exercise with professional interest, occasionally suggesting modifications to defensive tactics or questioning Geoffrey about supply arrangements during extended sieges. The Earl's experience includes several major siege operations, and his insights help Geoffrey understand how theoretical defensive capabilities translate into practical military effectiveness. The discussion reveals the complex relationship between castle design and the broader military strategies that govern medieval warfare. As the mock assault concludes, attention turns to the castle's role in administering Geoffrey's growing territory. The keep's upper floors will house not just Geoffrey's family, but also the clerks, scribes, and legal advisors necessary to manage feudal obligations throughout his lands. These administrative functions require specific architectural features, including chambers for conducting private meetings, secure storage for legal documents and financial records, and comfortable quarters for visiting nobles and church officials, whose cooperation Geoffrey needs to maintain his authority. The economic administration of feudal territories involves complexities that modern observers might not anticipate. Geoffrey must maintain detailed records of his vassals' military obligations, tracking which knights owe him service during specific seasons and which peasants are required to provide particular types of labour or agricultural products. The castle's administrative chambers will house rolls of parchment documenting these relationships, creating a bureaucratic infrastructure that makes feudal society function as a coherent economic and military system. Earl Robert's visit concludes with a private meeting in Geoffrey's temporary quarters, where the two Norman nobles discuss the broader political situation facing their people in England. Saxon resistance to Norman rule continues in several regions, requiring constant military vigilance and occasional punitive expeditions against rebellious nobles. The castle network being established across England serves not just defensive purposes, but also provides bases for offensive operations designed to eliminate remaining pockets of Saxon resistance. The conversation reveals the psychological dimensions of castle construction that extend beyond purely military considerations. These massive stone fortifications serve as visible symbols of Norman permanence and power, designed to convince both Saxon nobles and Norman colonists that the conquest represents a permanent change rather than a temporary military occupation. The impressive scale and sophisticated design of Norman castles communicate messages about technological superiority, organizational capability, and long-term commitment that words alone could never convey. As Earl Robert prepares to depart the following morning, he expresses satisfaction with Geoffrey's progress while also offering specific recommendations for improvements. The castle's outer walls should incorporate additional towers to provide better coverage of the surrounding terrain. The gatehouse design should include facilities for housing a permanent garrison of crossbowmen whose specialized skills make them particularly effective in siege defense. Most importantly, the castle should include a chapel large enough to serve not just Geoffrey's household, but also the broader community that will develop around the fortification. The chapel recommendation reflects the integral role of the church in feudal society and castle life. Medieval nobles understand that their authority depends not just on military force, but also on divine sanction expressed through church support. A castle chapel serves multiple functions, including providing religious services for the garrison, hosting ceremonies that reinforce social hierarchies, and offering sanctuary for those seeking protection from violence or legal persecution. The chapel also provides a venue for the religious education of noble children, ensuring that future generations understand their obligations to both earthly and heavenly authority. Earl Robert's departure marks a turning point in the castle's construction, as work begins on the outer defensive walls that will transform the keep from an isolated tower into the center of a comprehensive fortification complex. These outer walls require different construction techniques and serve different strategic purposes than the keep itself. Where the keep emphasizes vertical defense and concentrated firepower, the outer walls focus on creating multiple layers of obstacles that slow attacking forces while exposing them to defender fire from several directions simultaneously. The outer wall construction reveals new aspects of medieval engineering that demonstrate the sophistication of castle builders. The walls follow the natural contours of the hilltop, maximizing defensive advantages provided by terrain while minimizing the amount of stonework required. Strategic placement of towers along the wall's length ensures that defenders can provide covering fire for every section of the perimeter, eliminating blind spots where attackers might find shelter from arrow fire. The most impressive feature of the outer wall design is the barbican, an additional defensive structure that protects the main gate while creating a killing ground where attacking forces can be trapped and destroyed. The barbican's construction requires precise coordination between multiple work crews, as its complex design includes overlapping defensive features that must be perfectly aligned to function effectively. Master William personally oversees this work, understanding that any flaws in the barbican's design could compromise the security of the entire castle complex. The construction of the barbican requires specialized knowledge that few masons possess, making Master William's expertise invaluable to the project's success. The structure must be built in precise stages, with each phase of construction creating temporary vulnerabilities that skilled attackers might exploit. Workers begin by excavating foundations that extend 15 feet below ground level, deeper than those of the main walls due to the barbican's exposed position, and the concentrated forces it must withstand during siege warfare. The barbican's walls incorporate innovations that reflect recent developments in siege technology. Arrow loops are positioned at carefully calculated angles to provide overlapping fields of fire while minimizing exposure of defending archers. The walls themselves feature a slight outward lean that deflects stones hurled by siege engines while making scaling attempts virtually impossible. Hidden within the wall structure are chambers where defenders can store additional arrows, crossbow bolts, and containers of quicklime that can be heated and poured through murder holes onto attacking forces. As autumn deepens into winter, the pace of construction necessarily slows, but does not halt entirely. Geoffrey understands that work must continue despite harsh weather conditions, because Saxon resistance in neighbouring regions shows signs of increasing organisation and coordination. Recent intelligence reports describe Saxon nobles gathering support for potential uprisings planned for the following spring. The castle must be sufficiently complete to serve as a secure base for military operations designed to suppress these rebellions before they can threaten Norman control of the region. Winter construction presents unique challenges that test both the skill of the craftsmen and the determination of the workers. Mortar must be protected from freezing temperatures using techniques passed down through generations of Northern European builders. Stone cutting becomes more difficult, as water trapped in quarried blocks expands when frozen, sometimes causing carefully shaped stones to crack and become unusable. The workers themselves require additional food and shelter to maintain their strength during the coldest months, increasing the project's cost and complexity. Geoffrey adapts to these winter challenges by modifying work schedules and priorities to focus on tasks that can be completed effectively in cold conditions. Interior work within the keep receives increased attention as craftsmen install wooden floors, construct fireplaces and chimney systems, and begin the intricate carpentry required for doors, shutters, and furniture. These interior projects provide employment for skilled woodworkers, whose expertise becomes more valuable as stone cutting becomes less practical during the harshest weather. The keep's interior design reflects both the practical needs of medieval life and the social requirements of feudal lordship. Geoffrey's private chambers occupy the top floor of the structure, providing maximum security while offering commanding views of the surrounding countryside. These rooms include not just sleeping quarters, but also a private study where Geoffrey can conduct confidential business, examine maps and military reports, and maintain correspondence with other Norman nobles throughout England and Normandy. The study's furnishings reveal the intellectual demands of medieval lordship that casual observers might not recognize. Geoffrey maintains a collection of written works including military treatises, legal texts, and chronicles that help him understand both the practical and historical aspects of governance. His ability to read Latin and Norman French gives him access to knowledge accumulated over centuries of European political development. The study also contains maps drawn by his own scouts and information gathered from merchants, pilgrims, and other travellers who pass through his territory. Adjacent to Geoffrey's private quarters are rooms designated for his immediate family, though his wife and children remain in Normandy until the castle's completion ensures their safety. These chambers are designed with security features that reflect the constant dangers facing Norman nobles in recently conquered territories. Hidden passages connect the family quarters to escape routes that lead to the castle's most secure areas. Secret compartments built into the walls can conceal valuable items and important documents during emergencies. The Great Hall's construction continues throughout the winter months as craftsmen install the massive wooden beams that will support the roof structure. These timbers, cut from ancient oak trees in Geoffrey's forests, require teams of oxen to transport and position correctly. Each beam is carefully selected for strength and durability, with Master William personally inspecting every piece of wood to ensure it meets the exacting standards required for such a crucial structural element. The Great Hall's design incorporates subtle features that reinforce the social hierarchies central to feudal organization. The Lord's Table is positioned on a raised platform that elevates Geoffrey above all other occupants of the hall, visually demonstrating his superior status, while also providing tactical advantages during potential conflicts. The arrangement of other tables reflects the complex relationships between different ranks of nobility, with seating assignments that communicate precise gradations of status and favour. Beneath the Great Hall, the castle's ground floor storage areas take shape as workers install massive wooden bins for grain storage and stone-lined chambers for preserving meat and other perishables. These storage facilities represent one of the castle's most important defensive capabilities, as the ability to withstand extended sieges depends entirely on maintaining adequate food supplies for both the garrison and any civilians who might seek shelter within the castle walls during times of crisis. The storage areas also serve economic functions that extend beyond military considerations. Geoffrey's role as a feudal lord requires him to collect agricultural products from his peasants as payment for their use of his land and his protection. These tribute payments must be stored, processed, and eventually distributed to support his household, reward his followers, and generate surplus products that can be traded for manufactured goods, weapons, and other items not produced locally. As winter progresses, attention turns to the castle's water management systems, crucial infrastructure that determines whether the fortification can function effectively during both peace and war. The main well reaches deep into the bedrock, but additional cisterns collect rainwater from the castle's roofs and courtyards. These cisterns are lined with lead sheets and equipped with filtration systems using sand and charcoal to ensure water quality during extended storage periods. The water systems incorporate defensive features designed to prevent enemies from poisoning or disrupting the castle's supply during sieges. The wellhead is protected by a stone structure that can be sealed against contamination attempts, while the cisterns are designed with multiple chambers that can be isolated if one section becomes compromised. Underground channels connect different water sources, providing redundancy that ensures the castle's survival even if primary systems are damaged or destroyed. Spring's arrival brings renewed energy to the construction project as favourable weather allows work to resume on the outer defensive walls. The winter months have provided time for careful planning and preparation, with Master William using the indoor work period to train additional stonemasons in the specialised techniques required for castle construction. These newly trained craftsmen supplement the original work crews, allowing multiple sections of the outer walls to be built simultaneously. The outer walls incorporate lessons learned from recent siege warfare throughout Norman territories. Wall thickness varies according to the specific threats each section might face, with areas most vulnerable to siege engine attack receiving additional reinforcement. Strategic placement of sally ports allows defenders to launch surprise attacks against besieging forces, while hidden passages enable communication and supply movements between different sections of the fortification without exposure to enemy observation. Tower construction along the outer walls requires particularly careful attention to foundation work and structural integrity. Each tower must support its own weight, while also providing stable platforms for defensive engines, including ballistas, mangonels, and the massive stones used to break up attacking formations. The towers also house permanent garrison quarters for professional soldiers, whose full-time military service provides expertise that temporary levies cannot match. The southwestern tower receives special attention due to its position overlooking the main approach route to the castle. This tower's design includes features specifically intended to break up organized attacks before they can reach the main walls. Multiple levels of arrow loops provide overlapping fields of fire that can devastate infantry formations, while the tower's height allows defenders to observe and target enemy siege engines before they can be positioned effectively against the castle's defences. Geoffrey personally oversees the southwestern tower's construction, understanding that this structure will likely bear the brunt of any serious attack against his castle. His military experience allows him to envision how different types of assault might develop, and to ensure that the tower's defensive capabilities address the most likely threats. The tower's design reflects not just theoretical knowledge of siege warfare, but practical understanding gained through Geoffrey's participation in multiple castle attacks during the Norman conquest of England. The castle's economic functions continue to develop alongside its military capabilities as Geoffrey establishes the administrative systems necessary to govern his expanding territory. The castle's role as an economic centre requires facilities for conducting business, storing valuable goods, and maintaining the records necessary for effective feudal administration. A dedicated treasury chamber within the keep provides secure storage for Geoffrey's growing wealth, while also serving as a symbol of his successful establishment as a major regional power. The treasury's security features reflect both the value of its contents and the constant threats facing Norman nobles in recently conquered territories. Multiple locked doors, each requiring different keys held by trusted retainers, provide layered security against theft or unauthorized access. Hidden compartments within the chamber's walls can conceal the most valuable items during emergencies, while false walls and decoy containers might confuse potential thieves about the treasury's true contents and value. Geoffrey's growing wealth comes from multiple sources that demonstrate the economic foundation underlying feudal military power. Agricultural tribute from his peasants provides basic sustenance for his household and garrison, while also generating surplus products that can be sold in urban markets. Tolls collected from merchants using the river crossing create steady income that helps finance ongoing construction and military expenses. Most importantly, Geoffrey's success in establishing effective control over his territory attracts additional settlers whose economic activities expand the tax base supporting his lordship. The relationship between military security and economic prosperity becomes increasingly apparent as the castle nears completion. The fortification's impressive defences encourage merchants to use Geoffrey's territory for trade routes, knowing that their goods and persons will receive protection from bandits and rival nobles. This increased commercial activity generates additional tax revenue, while also providing Geoffrey's subjects with access to manufactured goods and luxury items that improve their quality of life and strengthen their loyalty to his rule. As summer arrives, the castle's outer walls approach completion, transforming Geoffrey's hilltop position into a comprehensive fortress capable of withstanding any conceivable attack. The finished walls rise 30 feet above the surrounding terrain, their smooth stone faces offering no handholds for would-be climbers, while their massive thickness can absorb tremendous punishment from siege engines. Crenellated battlements along the wall tops provide protected positions for archers and crossbowmen, while allowing defenders to observe approaching enemies from miles away. The completed fortification represents more than just military engineering. It stands as a monument to Norman determination and organizational capability, demonstrating to both Saxon subjects and Norman rivals that Geoffrey has successfully established permanent control over this strategically important region. The castle's impressive scale and sophisticated design communicate messages about Norman technological superiority and long-term commitment that help discourage potential challenges while encouraging cooperation from local populations. The castle's completion ceremony takes place on a warm July morning as Geoffrey formally takes residence in his new stronghold. The ceremony itself reflects the complex social relationships that define feudal society, with representatives from every level of the hierarchical system participating in rituals that reinforce their mutual obligations and dependencies. Earl Robert returns for the ceremony, bringing greetings from other Norman nobles and confirming Geoffrey's position within the broader network of relationships that govern Norman England. The ceremony begins with a religious service conducted by the castle's new chaplain, a learned priest, whose presence legitimizes Geoffrey's authority through church sanction. The service includes prayers for the castle's protection and blessings upon Geoffrey's rule, creating spiritual bonds that complement the military and economic relationships underlying feudal society. The chaplain's sermon emphasizes themes of duty, loyalty, and divine order that provide religious justification for the social hierarchies the castle both symbolizes and enforces. Following the religious ceremony, Geoffrey receives formal homage from his vassals, including the knights who will garrison the castle and the administrative officials who will help him govern his territory. Each vassal's oath of loyalty is carefully worded to specify the exact nature of his obligations to Geoffrey, while also defining the protection and support he can expect in return. These ceremonies create legal and social bonds that transform individual relationships into institutional structures capable of surviving changes in leadership and circumstance. The castle's Great Hall serves as the venue for the feast that concludes the completion ceremony, with seating arrangements that precisely reflect the social hierarchies governing feudal relationships. Geoffrey occupies the place of honour at the high table, flanked by Earl Robert and other distinguished guests whose presence validates his successful establishment as a regional power. Lesser nobles, wealthy merchants, and church officials occupy positions that communicate their exact status within the complex web of relationships that define medieval society. The feast itself demonstrates Geoffrey's prosperity and generosity while also serving practical purposes related to maintaining political alliances and social stability. The abundance and quality of food served reflects the productive capacity of Geoffrey's agricultural lands and the effectiveness of his administrative systems. The hospitality shown to guests from throughout the region creates obligations and relationships that strengthen Geoffrey's political position while also gathering intelligence about conditions and developments throughout Norman England. As evening settles over the completed castle, Geoffrey stands alone on the keep's highest tower, surveying the domain he has fought to win and built to hold. The castle's walls enclose not just buildings and defensive works, but the physical embodiment of a new social order that will govern European development for centuries to come. Every stone in those walls represents relationships of obligation and protection that bind together peasants and nobles, soldiers and craftsmen, priests and merchants in a complex system that provides security and stability in an age of constant danger and uncertainty. The lights flickering in peasant cottages scattered throughout the valley below represent lives that now depend on Geoffrey's protection and leadership. These people have accepted Norman rule not through choice, but through necessity, understanding that survival in medieval Europe requires the security that only strong lordship can provide. Their acceptance of feudal obligations in exchange for protection creates the human foundation upon which the entire castle system rests. Tomorrow will bring new challenges as Geoffrey begins the complex task of governing his established territory while also expanding his influence into neighbouring regions where Saxon resistance continues to threaten Norman control. The castle will serve not just as his residence and military headquarters, but as the administrative centre for economic, legal, and political activities that affect thousands of people across dozens of communities. The success or failure of feudal society will be determined by the ability of nobles like Geoffrey to balance the competing demands of military security, economic productivity, and social stability within the framework of relationships that the castle system both creates and protects. CTs. The morning sun finds Geoffrey in his private chambers, reviewing parchment reports that have arrived during the night from his scattered holdings. The documents, written in careful Latin script by clerks throughout his domain, tell stories of harvest yields, boundary disputes, and the constant small dramas that require a lord's attention. A miller in the eastern village claims his neighbour has diverted water from the stream that powers his wheel. Peasants in the southern hamlet report strange riders seen at dawn near the forest edge. A merchant caravan seeks permission to establish a permanent trading post near the river crossing. These mundane concerns consume far more of Geoffrey's time than the dramatic battles and sieges that chronicle writers prefer to record. Medieval lordship is fundamentally about administration, about making hundreds of small decisions that collectively determine whether a territory prospers or declines. Geoffrey's morning routine includes meeting with his steward to review accounts, consulting with his marshal about military preparations, and hearing petitions from subjects who have travelled days to seek his judgment on matters they cannot resolve locally. The steward's report reveals the complex economics underlying castle life. The recent harvest has produced surplus grain that can be sold to urban merchants, generating silver coins needed to purchase iron for weapons and tools. However, the surplus comes at a cost, as several peasant families have requested permission to leave Geoffrey's lands for territories where lords demand lower agricultural tribute. The steward recommends allowing these departures while simultaneously encouraging immigration from overcrowded regions where peasants might welcome the opportunity to farm Geoffrey's less densely settled lands. These population movements reflect broader demographic changes reshaping medieval Europe as agricultural innovations increase food production, while territorial expansion creates new opportunities for settlement. Geoffrey must balance his immediate need for agricultural labour against long-term strategies for territorial development. Peasants who leave his lands take valuable skills and knowledge with them, but forcing them to remain against their will creates resentment that could undermine the loyalty essential for effective feudal governance. The Marshal's morning briefing addresses military preparations that never truly cease even during periods of apparent peace. The castle's garrison requires constant training to maintain combat effectiveness, with different groups of knights and men-at-arms rotating through exercises designed to test their readiness for various types of threats. Recent intelligence from neighbouring territories suggests that Saxon resistance groups are attempting to coordinate their activities, potentially threatening Norman control of several strategic locations simultaneously. Geoffrey's response to these threats demonstrates the proactive approach that characterises successful medieval military leadership. Rather than waiting for enemies to attack his territory, he begins planning preemptive operations designed to disrupt Saxon coordination, while demonstrating Norman strength to potential allies and enemies throughout the region. These operations require careful timing and substantial resources, but they offer the possibility of eliminating threats before they can fully develop. The planning session reveals the sophisticated intelligence networks that support medieval military operations. Geoffrey maintains contacts with merchants, pilgrims, and other travellers, whose journeys provide them with opportunities to observe conditions throughout neighbouring territories. These informal intelligence sources supplement information gathered by professional scouts and spies, whose activities remain carefully concealed from potential enemies. The combination of formal and informal intelligence gathering creates comprehensive awareness of regional political and military developments. During the afternoon, Geoffrey holds court in the Great Hall, hearing cases that illustrate the complex legal relationships governing feudal society. A knight accused of failing to fulfill his military obligations presents evidence that illness prevented his participation in a recent campaign. Two merchants dispute the ownership of goods damaged during transport through Geoffrey's territory. A village elder requests permission to hold a market fair that could generate additional tax revenue, while also providing local residents with access to manufactured goods and luxury items. Each case requires Geoffrey to balance competing interests, while maintaining the legal precedents that provide stability and predictability within his domain. The knight's illness excuse must be evaluated carefully to determine whether it represents genuine incapacity or an attempt to avoid military service that other vassals might imitate. The merchant's dispute involves commercial law that affects Geoffrey's reputation among trading networks, extending far beyond his immediate territory. The market fair proposal offers economic benefits, but also creates security challenges that could strain his limited military resources. Geoffrey's legal decisions reflect principles that extend beyond immediate case resolution to encompass broader strategies for territorial governance and social control. Consistent enforcement of feudal obligations maintains the military capabilities essential for territorial defense while also demonstrating to vassals that their own rights and privileges receive equal protection. Fair resolution of commercial disputes encourages continued trade that generates tax revenue and provides subjects with economic opportunities that strengthen their attachment to Geoffrey's rule. The complexity of these legal relationships becomes apparent through the afternoon's final case, which involves a dispute between a village priest and local peasants over the use of church lands for grazing livestock. The priest claims that peasants have exceeded traditional grazing rights, damaging lands needed for church maintenance and charitable activities. The peasants argue that recent population growth has increased their need for additional pasture, while their tribute payments to Geoffrey have left them unable to purchase grazing rights from other sources. This case illustrates the three-way relationships between secular lordship, church authority, and peasant needs that characterize medieval rural society. Geoffrey must respect church privileges, while also ensuring that his subjects can meet their economic needs and fulfill their feudal obligations. The priest's cooperation is essential for maintaining religious legitimacy, but the peasants' welfare affects both agricultural productivity and military recruitment. Finding solutions that satisfy all parties requires diplomatic skill and creative problem-solving that chronicles rarely document, but that consume enormous amounts of lordly attention. As evening approaches, Geoffrey's attention turns to family matters that have been complicated by the demands of establishing effective territorial control. His wife and children remain in Normandy, where they enjoy greater security and comfort than the newly completed English castle can currently provide. However, their continued absence creates political problems as other Norman nobles question Geoffrey's commitment to permanent settlement, while also limiting his ability to form marriage alliances that could strengthen his regional position. The family separation also creates personal challenges that affect Geoffrey's effectiveness as both a military leader and territorial administrator. Medieval lordship is fundamentally a family enterprise, with wives and children playing crucial roles in diplomatic relationships, economic management, and social activities that maintain the networks of obligation and loyalty underlying feudal society. Geoffrey's wife would normally oversee household administration, manage relationships with other noble families, and provide counsel on political matters, where her perspective and connections could prove invaluable. The decision to bring his family to England requires careful timing that balances security considerations against political necessities. The castle's defensive capabilities can protect them from military attacks, but the broader political situation remains unstable enough to create risks that might not be apparent until too late. Geoffrey must also consider the message that family relocation would send to both supporters and enemies about his confidence in the permanence of Norman control over his territory. The evening meal in the Great Hall serves multiple purposes beyond simple sustenance, functioning as a daily demonstration of social hierarchies, while also providing opportunities for informal political communication and relationship building. The seating arrangements reflect current political relationships, with honoured guests and favoured retainers occupying positions that communicate their status to everyone present. The quality and abundance of food served demonstrates Geoffrey's prosperity, while also fulfilling his obligations to provide hospitality that maintains the loyalty of his followers. Conversation during the meal reveals the constant flow of information and gossip that shapes medieval political decision-making. Knights recently returned from visits to other territories report on military preparations, economic conditions, and political developments throughout the region. Merchants describe trade conditions and urban developments that could affect Geoffrey's economic interests. Local officials discuss administrative challenges and opportunities for improving governmental effectiveness. This informal information exchange supplements the formal intelligence gathering that supports Geoffrey's strategic planning, providing him with detailed awareness of conditions throughout his sphere of influence. The Great Hall's social atmosphere encourages candid discussion that might not occur during formal meetings, allowing Geoffrey to gauge the true opinions and concerns of his followers, while also identifying potential problems before they become serious threats. After the evening meal concludes, Geoffrey retires to his private study for the day's final administrative tasks. Correspondence from other Norman nobles requires careful responses that maintain political relationships while protecting his territorial interests. Letters from his family in Normandy provide personal news, but also contain political intelligence about court developments that could affect English affairs. Reports from his agents in distant territories offer insights into broader political and military trends that could eventually impact his own security and prosperity. The study's candlelit atmosphere provides an appropriate setting for the contemplative aspects of medieval lordship that contemporary accounts rarely emphasize. Geoffrey must constantly evaluate long-term strategies while managing immediate challenges, balancing competing interests while maintaining the consistent policies that provide stability for his subjects. The decisions he makes in the privacy of his study will affect thousands of people and could determine whether his newly established lordship survives and prospers or declines into insignificance. The castle's nighttime security arrangements reflect the constant vigilance required to maintain Norman control over recently conquered territories. Guards patrol the walls throughout the night, their movements coordinated to ensure that no section of the fortification remains unobserved for extended periods. Sentries posted at strategic locations maintain communication through horn calls and signal fires that can alert the garrison to approaching threats, while also summoning assistance from neighbouring castles if circumstances require coordinated defensive action. The Night Watch includes both professional soldiers and local militia, whose knowledge of the surrounding terrain makes them particularly effective at detecting unusual activities that might indicate enemy reconnaissance or preparation for attacks. These local forces understand the normal patterns of movement and activity throughout the region, allowing them to identify anomalies that foreign troops might overlook. Their integration into the castle's defensive system demonstrates how successful Norman colonization depends on cooperation with Saxon populations rather than simple military domination. Geoffrey's own sleeping arrangements reflect the personal security concerns that accompany medieval lordship. His chambers include multiple escape routes that could allow him to reach the castle's most secure areas, even if enemies penetrated the keep's outer defences. Trusted retainers sleep in adjacent rooms, ready to respond immediately to any threats against their lord's person. Weapons remain within easy reach, and Geoffrey sleeps in clothing that would allow him to fight effectively if awakened by emergency circumstances. These security precautions might seem excessive to modern observers, but they reflect realistic assessments of the dangers facing Norman nobles in territories where Saxon resentment and foreign threats create constant possibilities for assassination attempts or surprise attacks. Geoffrey's survival depends not just on his castle's defensive capabilities, but on personal vigilance and the loyalty of followers whose own safety and prosperity depend on their lord's continued success. The pre-dawn hours bring the day's first intelligence reports as scouts return from patrol missions throughout Geoffrey's territory. These reports provide detailed information about conditions along roads and frontier areas where potential threats might develop without advance warning. Recent scout observations include increased activity around Saxon settlements that could indicate preparation for coordinated resistance, unusual movements by merchants whose trade routes might conceal military reconnaissance, and changes in weather conditions that could affect both agricultural prospects and military planning. The integration of this intelligence into Geoffrey's daily decision-making process demonstrates the systematic approach that characterizes effective medieval governance. Information gathered during the night influences the morning's administrative priorities, military preparations, and diplomatic communications. Patterns identified over multiple days or weeks guide longer-term strategic planning, while also providing early warning of developing threats that require immediate countermeasures. As dawn breaks over the castle walls, Geoffrey begins another day of balancing the competing demands that define medieval lordship. Military security requires constant attention and substantial resources, but economic development provides the foundation for long-term territorial success. Political relationships must be maintained through careful diplomacy and consistent policy implementation, but personal loyalties depend on individual attention and responsiveness to followers' needs and concerns. The castle that Geoffrey has built represents more than stone and timber. It embodies a comprehensive system for organizing human relationships and activities that will influence European development for centuries to come. The daily routines that fill his hours as lord of this territory are creating precedents and establishing institutions that will outlast his individual reign to become integral elements of medieval civilization. The success of Geoffrey's enterprise depends ultimately on his ability to transform military conquest into legitimate governance that serves the interests of all his subjects, while maintaining the security and prosperity necessary for long-term stability. The castle provides the physical framework for this transformation, but its ultimate effectiveness will be determined by the quality of leadership and administration that Geoffrey and his successors provide within its walls. As the morning sun illuminates the castle's towers and walls, Geoffrey stands ready to face another day of challenges and opportunities in his ongoing effort to establish lasting Norman control over this corner of medieval England. The teenage boy who once dreamed of knightly glory has become a territorial administrator whose decisions affect thousands of lives and whose success or failure will help determine the future course of European political development. The afternoon brings unexpected visitors as a delegation from the monastery of St. Albans arrives at Geoffrey's gates, their brown robes dust-covered from days of travel along muddy English roads. Brother Benedict, the monastery's treasurer, carries urgent news that will reshape Geoffrey's understanding of the delicate balance between secular and ecclesiastical power in Norman England. The monks seek Geoffrey's protection for a new scriptorium they wish to establish near his territory, offering in exchange their expertise in record-keeping and their connections to the broader network of religious houses that spans all of Christendom. The meeting takes place in Geoffrey's solar, a smaller chamber adjacent to the Great Hall, where private business can be conducted away from the curious ears of household servants and visiting petitioners. Brother Benedict produces a charter, written in elegant Latin script, its parchment sealed with the abbey's distinctive red wax. The document outlines a partnership that would establish the monk's scriptorium within Geoffrey's protection, while providing him with access to their scholarly resources and administrative expertise. The proposal reveals aspects of medieval economic development that extend far beyond simple agricultural production and military conquest. The monk's scriptorium would produce illuminated manuscripts, legal documents, and commercial records that serve markets throughout England and continental Europe. Their work requires expensive materials, including vellum, precious metals for illumination, and exotic pigments that arrive through trading networks stretching from Scotland to the Mediterranean. The economic value of their production rivals that of any craft workshop, while their scholarly activities attract students and pilgrims whose presence would enhance Geoffrey's territorial prestige. Brother Benedict explains that the monastery's decision to establish this scriptorium reflects broader changes in how religious institutions adapt to the realities of Norman rule. The new political order has created opportunities for cooperation between secular and ecclesiastical authorities that benefit both parties while serving the broader interests of social stability and economic development. The monks offer Geoffrey not just their scholarly services, but also their connections to papal authorities, whose approval could legitimize his territorial claims while protecting him from ecclesiastical sanctions that might undermine his political position. The negotiations reveal the sophisticated diplomatic skills that successful medieval lords must develop to navigate relationships with religious authorities, whose influence often exceeds that of secular nobles. Geoffrey must balance respect for church privileges against his own territorial interests, while also considering how his decisions might affect his relationships with other Norman nobles who have established different arrangements with religious institutions in their domains. The outcome of these discussions could establish precedents that influence church-state relations throughout the region for generations to come. As the afternoon progresses, Geoffrey's attention is drawn to activities in the castle's outer courtyard, where his master-at-arms is conducting training exercises with the garrison's newest recruits. These young men, mostly second sons of minor nobles and ambitious peasants seeking military advancement, represent the human foundation upon which Norman military superiority depends. Their training reveals the systematic approach that transforms individual fighters into coordinated military units capable of complex battlefield maneuvers and siege operations. The training begins with basic weapons instruction as recruits learn to handle the sword, spear, and shield that form the primary armament of medieval infantry. The master-at-arms demonstrates proper techniques for offensive and defensive combat, while emphasizing the importance of maintaining formation discipline during actual battles. Individual skill with weapons means little if soldiers cannot coordinate their actions with their comrades during the chaos and confusion of medieval warfare. The progression from individual weapons training to unit tactics demonstrates how medieval military organization transforms personal combat abilities into collective military effectiveness. Recruits learn to advance in formation while maintaining shield walls that can absorb enemy attacks, to execute coordinated charges that maximize the impact of their assault, and to conduct organized retreats that preserve unit cohesion even during tactical defeats. These skills require months of practice to master and years of experience to apply effectively under combat conditions. The afternoon's most challenging exercise involves siege warfare training, as recruits practice operating the ballistas and mangonels that defend the castle's walls. These siege engines require teams of operators whose coordination determines their effectiveness in actual combat situations. Loading procedures must be executed quickly and accurately while under enemy fire, while aiming requires understanding of trajectory and wind conditions that can only be developed through extensive practice. The complexity of siege engine operation explains why experienced crews command premium wages and why their loyalty is essential for castle defense. Geoffrey observes these exercises with professional interest, understanding that his garrison's effectiveness depends not just on individual courage and skill, but on the systematic training that transforms civilian recruits into professional soldiers. His own military experience allows him to evaluate the training's quality while identifying areas where improvement might enhance his force's combat capabilities. The relationship between lord and garrison extends beyond simple command authority to encompass personal involvement in their professional development and career advancement. The castle's economic activities continue throughout the afternoon as merchants arrive to conduct business that generates the revenues necessary to support Geoffrey's military and administrative expenses. A wool merchant from Flanders seeks to establish regular purchasing agreements for fleeces produced by Geoffrey's tenant farmers. Italian bankers offer letters of credit that would allow Geoffrey to conduct financial transactions with distant territories, without the risks associated with transporting large quantities of silver coins. Local artisans present examples of their work while seeking commissions for weapons, tools, and luxury goods needed by Geoffrey's household. These commercial activities reveal the complex economic relationships that support medieval castle life while connecting local production to international trading networks. Geoffrey's decisions about which merchants to favour and which trading partnerships to establish affect not only his own prosperity, but also the economic opportunities available to his subjects throughout the territory. Successful merchants bring wealth and skills to the region, while unsuccessful ones may leave for more favourable locations, taking their resources and expertise with them. The wool merchant's proposal illustrates how agricultural production connects to international markets through relationships that benefit all participants when properly managed. Geoffrey's tenant farmers produce high-quality fleeces that command premium prices in Flemish cloth-making centres, but they lack the connections and transportation capabilities necessary to access these distant markets independently. The merchant provides these services in exchange for exclusive purchasing rights and guaranteed supply quantities that allow him to fulfill his own commitments to Flemish manufacturers. The Italian bankers represent even more sophisticated economic relationships that reflect the growing complexity of medieval commercial development. Their letters of credit eliminate the need to transport actual coins over long distances, while also providing currency exchange services that allow merchants to conduct business across territorial boundaries, where different rulers mint different coins with varying silver content. These financial innovations make possible the large-scale trading operations that generate wealth for everyone involved, while also creating dependencies that bind distant territories together through networks of mutual economic interest. As evening approaches, Geoffrey's household prepares for the day's most important social event, as neighbouring nobles arrive for a feast that will celebrate the completion of his castle, while also serving crucial diplomatic purposes. Lord William de Warenne, whose lands border Geoffrey's territory to the north, brings news of Saxon raiding parties that have been attacking isolated farmsteads near the frontier. Lady Matilda de Braos, whose late husband's estates she now administers with remarkable skill, seeks Geoffrey's support for a legal dispute with church authorities over property rights that could affect similar cases throughout the region. The Great Hall's transformation for this feast demonstrates the sophisticated social machinery that supports medieval political relationships. Servants arrange tables and benches according to precise protocols that communicate the relative status of each guest, while avoiding the insults and misunderstandings that could damage important political alliances. The high table accommodates Geoffrey and his most distinguished visitors, while other tables house guests according to their rank within the complex hierarchy of medieval nobility. The feast itself serves multiple purposes beyond simple hospitality, functioning as a forum for political discussion, economic negotiation, and social networking that maintains the relationships essential for regional stability. Conversations during the meal allow nobles to share information about military threats, economic opportunities, and political developments throughout their territories, while also providing opportunities to negotiate agreements and resolve disputes that might otherwise require formal legal proceedings or military action. Lord William's report about Saxon raiding activities requires immediate attention, as these attacks represent not just local security problems, but potential indicators of broader resistance movements that could threaten Norman control throughout the region. The raiders' tactics suggest coordination and planning that exceed the capabilities of simple bandit groups, while their targeting of specific types of targets indicates strategic thinking that could be part of larger military preparations. Geoffrey must balance immediate defensive measures against longer-term strategies for eliminating the sources of Saxon resistance. Lady Matilda's legal dispute with church authorities reveals the ongoing tensions between secular and ecclesiastical jurisdiction that complicate medieval governance at every level. Her late husband's will granted certain lands to the church for the salvation of his soul, but subsequent interpretation of the grant's terms has created conflicts over administrative authority and revenue collection that affect both parties' interests. The resolution of this dispute could establish legal precedents that influence similar cases throughout Norman England, while also affecting relationships between secular and religious authorities more broadly. The evening's entertainment reflects the cultural sophistication that successful Norman nobles cultivate to demonstrate their legitimacy as rulers of territories with rich intellectual and artistic traditions. A travelling minstrel performs songs that celebrate recent Norman military victories, while also preserving older traditions that connect the present generation to their ancestral heritage. His repertoire includes both martial ballads that inspire military valour and romantic tales that provide emotional relief from the constant tensions of medieval political life. The minstrel's performance serves educational purposes that extend beyond simple entertainment, providing historical narratives that help noble audiences understand their place within the broader context of European political development. His songs preserve memories of great battles and legendary heroes, while also transmitting practical wisdom about leadership, loyalty, and the proper conduct of noble life. The accuracy of these historical accounts matters less than their effectiveness in reinforcing the values and relationships that sustain medieval society. As the feast concludes and guests prepare for departure or retirement to chambers within the castle, Geoffrey reflects on the day's accomplishments and the challenges that tomorrow will bring. The successful completion of diplomatic negotiations with Brother Benedict has strengthened his relationships with ecclesiastical authorities, while providing his territory with valuable economic and scholarly resources. The military training exercises have improved his garrison's combat effectiveness, while demonstrating his commitment to maintaining the defensive capabilities that protect his subjects from external threats. The evening's social activities have reinforced political relationships that provide the foundation for regional stability, while also generating intelligence about conditions throughout neighbouring territories. Lord William's information about Saxon raiding parties requires immediate military response, while Lady Matilda's legal challenges suggest broader problems with church-state relations that could affect Geoffrey's own dealings with religious authorities. These issues will require careful attention and skillful management if Geoffrey is to maintain the delicate balance of relationships that sustain his lordship. The Night Watch takes up their positions as Geoffrey retires to his private chambers, their vigilance ensuring the security that allows normal life to continue within the castle walls. The guard's presence represents more than simple military precaution, embodying the fundamental promise of protection that justifies feudal authority and legitimizes the social relationships that bind medieval society together. Their effectiveness depends not just on their military training, but on their loyalty to Geoffrey personally and their commitment to the broader social order that the castle system represents. Geoffrey's evening routine includes private prayers that acknowledge his dependence on divine favour for the success of his earthly endeavours. Medieval lordship carries spiritual as well as temporal responsibilities, with nobles expected to serve as moral exemplars whose personal conduct influences the behaviour of their subjects, while also affecting their own prospects for eternal salvation. The balance between worldly ambition and spiritual duty creates tensions that every medieval lord must navigate, while maintaining the authentic faith that legitimizes his authority in the eyes of both subjects and superiors. The castle's nighttime atmosphere reflects the complex mixture of security and vulnerability that characterizes medieval life at every social level. The massive walls and trained garrison provide protection against external enemies, but they cannot eliminate all sources of danger or uncertainty. Political relationships require constant attention and careful management to prevent conflicts that could destroy years of patient diplomacy. Economic prosperity depends on factors beyond any individual's control, including weather, trade conditions, and the decisions of distant authorities whose interests may not align with the local needs. As Geoffrey settles into sleep, his thoughts turn to the broader implications of the life he has built within these stone walls. The castle represents more than personal achievement or military necessity. It embodies a vision of social organization that promises security and prosperity in exchange for loyalty and service, creating relationships that bind individuals together in networks of mutual obligation and support. The success or failure of this vision will determine not just Geoffrey's personal fate, but the future development of medieval civilization throughout Europe. The pre-dawn hours bring the castle's first stirrings of activity as servants begin preparations for another day of the complex activities that sustain medieval lordship. Kitchen staff kindle fires and begin preparing the bread and porridge that will feed the castle's inhabitants. Grooms tend to the horses, whose condition affects both military readiness and the transportation capabilities essential for effective territorial administration. Guards change shifts according to schedules that ensure continuous security while preventing the fatigue that could compromise defensive effectiveness. These routine activities reflect the sophisticated organizational systems that make castle life possible while supporting the broader economic and military functions that justify feudal authority. Every aspect of daily life requires coordination and planning that transforms individual efforts into collective achievements. The successful management of these systems demonstrates administrative competence while creating the stability and predictability that subjects expect from effective leadership. Geoffrey's morning routine begins before dawn as he reviews intelligence reports that arrived during the night and prepares for the day's administrative and military responsibilities. The early morning hours provide opportunities for private thought and planning that become increasingly rare as the day progresses and demands from subjects, allies, and superiors multiply. His personal discipline and systematic approach to daily tasks set standards that influence the behavior of everyone within his household, while demonstrating the self-control and dedication that legitimate authority requires. The morning light reveals a castle that has become far more than a military fortification, transforming into the administrative center of a complex territorial organization that affects thousands of lives throughout Geoffrey's domain. The stone walls that once represented primarily defensive capabilities now enclose a miniature city where economic, political, social, and cultural activities create the foundation for medieval civilization. The success of this transformation demonstrates how individual achievement can contribute to broader historical developments that influence human society for centuries to come. As another day begins within the castle walls, Geoffrey prepares to face the continuing challenges of medieval lordship with the confidence that comes from proven success and the wisdom gained through years of experience. The teenage knight who once dreamed of glory in battle has become a mature administrator whose decisions shape the lives of his subjects while contributing to the broader development of European political and social institutions. His castle stands as a monument to human determination and organizational capability, proving that individuals can create lasting change through careful planning, persistent effort, and unwavering commitment to their chosen objectives. The morning sun illuminates walls that will endure for centuries, their stones bearing witness to the daily struggles and triumphs of medieval life, while sheltering future generations who will build upon the foundations that Geoffrey and his contemporaries have established. The feudal system taking root within these walls will evolve and adapt to changing circumstances, but its fundamental principles of mutual obligation and hierarchical organization will continue to influence European development long after Geoffrey's own story has become part of the historical record that future lords will study as they face their own challenges and opportunities. The rhythmic sound of hammers on stone echoes through the morning air as Geoffrey's attention turns to the newest addition rising within his castle walls, the chapel that will serve not merely as a place of worship, but as the spiritual heart of his growing domain. Brother Thomas, the master mason recommended by the monks of St. Albans, oversees the delicate work of carving the stone columns that will support the chapel's vaulted ceiling. Each column represents weeks of painstaking labor, with craftsmen using techniques passed down through generations of cathedral builders to create the intricate capitals that will support the weight of stone and timber above. The chapel's construction requires different skills than those used for defensive walls, demanding artisans who understand the subtle mathematics of arch construction and the precise angles needed to distribute weight through stone columns to solid foundations. Brother Thomas examines each carved element with the eye of someone who understands that structural failure in a chapel roof could kill dozens of worshippers, while also destroying months of expensive work. His supervision ensures that aesthetic beauty never compromises structural integrity, creating sacred space that will endure for centuries, while inspiring the devotion essential for medieval spiritual life. Geoffrey's involvement in the chapel's design reflects his understanding that effective lordship requires attention to his subjects' spiritual as well as material needs. The chapel must accommodate not just his own household's religious obligations, but also serve the broader community that has developed around his castle. Peasants from nearby villages will travel here for major religious festivals, merchants will seek blessings for their commercial ventures, and knights will pray for divine protection before departing on military campaigns. The chapel's size and grandeur communicate messages about Geoffrey's piety and prosperity, while providing practical space for the religious activities that bind medieval communities together. The morning's religious discussions extend beyond architectural concerns to encompass the theological questions that affect Geoffrey's relationships with church authorities throughout the region. Brother Benedict's presence provides Geoffrey with expert guidance on canonical law, helping him navigate the complex regulations that govern interactions between secular and ecclesiastical jurisdiction. A recent dispute over marriage contracts has created tensions with the local bishop, while questions about inheritance rights for church properties require careful handling to avoid conflicts that could undermine Geoffrey's political position. These theological complexities reveal how medieval governance requires expertise in religious as well as secular law, with successful lords needing to understand church doctrine sufficiently to avoid inadvertent violations that could result in excommunication or interdict. Geoffrey's education included basic Latin and familiarity with religious texts, but the practical application of canonical principles to specific legal situations requires ongoing consultation with trained clerics whose expertise complements his own administrative and military skills. The chapel's altar stone arrives during the morning's activities, transported with enormous care from quarries in Normandy, where Geoffrey's family has maintained traditional connections for generations. This single piece of marble weighs nearly half a ton and required weeks of preparation to transport safely across the English Channel and through the dangerous roads of recently conquered territory. Its installation represents not just architectural achievement, but also symbolic connection to the Norman homeland that legitimizes Geoffrey's authority, while demonstrating his continuing ties to the broader Norman community. Brother Thomas supervises the altar stone's positioning with meticulous attention to religious requirements that govern the proper orientation and consecration of sacred spaces. The altar must face east toward Jerusalem, its height and proportions must conform to canonical specifications, and its installation must include the placement of sacred relics that transform ordinary stone into holy space, blessed by divine presence. These religious requirements shape architectural decisions, while creating opportunities for Geoffrey to demonstrate his orthodoxy and devotion to church authorities whose approval strengthens his political legitimacy. The midday meal brings together the diverse communities that have gathered around Geoffrey's castle, creating opportunities for informal interaction between groups whose relationships define the social structure of his territory. The Great Hall accommodates not just Geoffrey's household knights and administrative officials, but also the craftsmen working on the chapel, merchants conducting business within the castle walls, and representatives from nearby villages who have come to resolve disputes or seek assistance with problems beyond local capabilities. The seating arrangements for this meal reflect the complex social hierarchies that govern medieval community life, with careful attention to precedents that acknowledges status differences while avoiding the insults that could damage important relationships. Brother Benedict receives a place of honor that recognizes his religious authority and scholarly expertise, while Master Thomas sits with other skilled craftsmen whose specialized knowledge commands respect, despite their non-noble origins. The merchants occupy positions that reflect their economic importance, while acknowledging their social limitations in a society that values birth and military service above commercial success. Conversation during the meal reveals the interconnected nature of medieval community life, with discussions ranging from technical problems in chapel construction to broader questions about political developments throughout the region. Brother Benedict shares news from other monasteries about scholarly activities and religious developments that could affect local church-state relations. Master Thomas describes architectural innovations he has observed in other castle projects, offering suggestions that might improve Geoffrey's own construction efforts, while building professional relationships that could prove valuable in future projects. The merchants contribute information about trade conditions and political stability in distant territories, providing Geoffrey with intelligence that supplements reports from his own scouts and diplomatic contacts. Their perspectives on economic trends and commercial opportunities help Geoffrey understand how his territorial policies affect broader trading networks, while identifying potential sources of revenue that could finance future military and construction projects. The informal exchange of information during communal meals creates intelligence networks that support medieval governance while strengthening social bonds between different community groups. Geoffrey's afternoon administrative duties include reviewing the accounts that Brother Benedict has prepared for the chapel construction project, documents that reveal the sophisticated financial planning required for major medieval building projects. The costs extend far beyond simple material expenses to encompass transportation, skilled labour, specialised tools, and the complex logistics of coordinating work by dozens of craftsmen over months or years of construction. The accounting systems developed by monastic communities provide Geoffrey with management tools that improve his ability to control expenses while ensuring that resources are allocated efficiently among competing priorities. The financial records also reveal the economic impact of castle construction on Geoffrey's broader territory, with local quarries, forests, and craft workshops all contributing materials and services that generate income for his subjects while building the infrastructure that supports his lordship. The multiplier effects of construction spending create prosperity that extends throughout the regional economy, demonstrating how military and religious building projects serve economic development purposes that justify their substantial costs through benefits that extend far beyond their immediate functions. Brother Benedict's financial expertise proves particularly valuable in managing the complex transactions required for international trade relationships that supply exotic materials needed for chapel decoration. Precious metals for illuminated manuscripts, rare pigments for wall paintings, and specialized tools for stone carving all require commercial relationships that span European trading networks while involving currencies, exchange rates, and credit arrangements that exceed the capabilities of most secular administrators. The monastery's commercial connections provide Geoffrey with access to resources and expertise that enhance his territorial capabilities while strengthening his relationships with religious institutions. The afternoon's most significant development occurs when a messenger arrives with news that will reshape Geoffrey's understanding of the broader political situation affecting Norman England. King William has announced plans for a major military campaign against Scottish raids along the northern frontier, requiring military service from all his major vassals, including Geoffrey. The summons demands not just Geoffrey's personal participation, but also substantial numbers of knights and men-at-arms whose absence could leave his territory vulnerable to Saxon attacks or internal rebellion. Geoffrey's response to this royal summons demonstrates the complex calculations that define medieval political relationships, with personal loyalty to his sovereign balanced against territorial responsibilities that cannot be abandoned without serious consequences. The military obligations of feudal service require him to provide specific numbers of fully equipped knights for specific periods of service. But the practical implications of meeting these requirements could undermine his ability to maintain security and governance within his own domain. The preparation for royal military service reveals the sophisticated logistical capabilities that medieval lords must develop to fulfill their feudal obligations while maintaining territorial effectiveness. Geoffrey must select which knights and soldiers will accompany him on campaign, while ensuring that those remaining behind possess sufficient capability to defend his lands and maintain civil order. The selection process requires careful evaluation of individual skills, loyalty, and local knowledge that determines both military effectiveness and political reliability. Military preparation also requires substantial financial resources for equipment, supplies, and transportation that strain Geoffrey's treasury while competing with ongoing construction and administrative expenses. The cost of outfitting a single knight for extended campaign service could support several peasant families for an entire year, while the expenses of maintaining horses, weapons, and provisions during military operations represent major investments that generate no immediate economic returns. These financial demands explain why medieval military service often creates economic hardships that affect entire territories for years after campaigns conclude. The evening brings intensive planning sessions as Geoffrey and his military advisors develop strategies for maintaining territorial security while fulfilling royal military obligations. The discussions reveal the delicate balance between competing demands that characterizes medieval lordship, with every decision creating advantages in some areas while potentially creating vulnerabilities in others. The advisors include both military professionals, whose experience guides tactical planning, and administrative officials, whose knowledge of local conditions helps evaluate political risks and economic implications. Master Ralph, Geoffrey's most experienced knight, recommends leaving behind a core of veteran soldiers whose knowledge of local terrain and enemy tactics makes them particularly valuable for territorial defense. These men have participated in previous campaigns against Saxon resistance and understand the specific challenges posed by enemies who know the countryside intimately while enjoying support from portions of the local population. Their retention would provide continuity of military leadership, while also demonstrating Geoffrey's commitment to protecting his subjects during his absence. The steward's concerns focus on administrative continuity and economic management during Geoffrey's extended absence from the territory. Medieval lordship requires personal attention to hundreds of details that cannot be delegated effectively to subordinates lacking the authority and knowledge necessary for complex decision-making. Legal disputes, commercial negotiations, and diplomatic relationships all require the Lord's direct involvement, creating potential problems when military obligations remove him from his territory for months at a time. The solution to these competing demands requires careful delegation of authority combined with clear instructions for handling various types of problems that might arise during Geoffrey's absence. Brother Benedict's administrative expertise proves invaluable in developing systems for maintaining governmental continuity, while his religious authority provides legitimacy for decisions made in Geoffrey's name. The arrangement creates temporary power sharing that serves immediate needs while establishing precedents that could influence future territorial administration. As night falls over the castle, Geoffrey's final preparations include personal meetings with key individuals whose loyalty and competence will determine his territory's survival during the coming months of uncertainty. Each conversation addresses specific concerns while also reinforcing personal relationships that provide the foundation for effective medieval governance. The meetings reveal the intensely personal nature of feudal authority, with political relationships based on individual trust and mutual obligation, rather than institutional structures that can function independently of particular personalities. Lady Margaret, the Castellan's wife who will oversee household administration during Geoffrey's absence, receives detailed instructions about managing the complex social relationships that maintain stability within the castle community. Her responsibilities include not just supervising domestic staff and managing supplies, but also maintaining the diplomatic relationships with neighbouring nobles whose cooperation could prove essential during military emergencies. Her social skills and political judgment make her an invaluable partner in Geoffrey's territorial administration, though her authority derives from her husband's position rather than independent legal recognition. The Master-at-Arms receives specific guidance about training programs that must continue during Geoffrey's absence to maintain the garrison's combat effectiveness, while also preparing new recruits who could replace casualties from the royal campaign. Military readiness requires constant attention that cannot be interrupted by political developments, with training schedules and equipment maintenance proceeding according to established routines, regardless of external circumstances. The Master-at-Arms' experience and dedication ensure continuity of military preparation that serves both immediate defensive needs and longer-term strategic requirements. Geoffrey's private prayers that evening acknowledge the uncertainties and dangers that accompany medieval military service, while seeking divine protection for both himself and the territory he must temporarily abandon. The spiritual preparation for warfare includes confession and absolution that cleanse his soul of sins that might compromise divine favor during battle, while also providing opportunities for reflection about the moral implications of violence undertaken in service of political objectives. Medieval military service carries spiritual as well as temporal dimensions, with religious obligations that complement secular duties in creating comprehensive frameworks for honourable conduct. The castle's nighttime routines continue according to established patterns that provide stability and security, regardless of impending changes in leadership arrangements. Guards maintain their vigilant watch along the walls, while household servants complete daily tasks that sustain the complex community living within the fortification's protection. The continuation of normal activities demonstrates the institutional strength that Geoffrey has built during his years of territorial development, creating systems capable of functioning effectively even during his absence. The pre-dawn hours bring final preparations as Geoffrey dons his armour and prepares for departure to join the royal army assembling near York. The ceremony of departure includes religious blessings that invoke divine protection, while also providing opportunities for public demonstrations of loyalty and support from subjects whose welfare depends on their lord's success in royal service. The formal leave-taking reinforces social bonds while creating shared expectations about Geoffrey's eventual return and the continuation of established governmental arrangements. Brother Benedict offers final prayers that commend Geoffrey's mission to divine favour, while blessing the territory and its inhabitants during the period of separation ahead. The religious ceremony creates sacred bonds that complement secular obligations, invoking supernatural protection that supplements human planning and preparation. The spiritual dimensions of medieval departure rituals acknowledge the ultimate dependence on divine providence that shapes all human endeavours regardless of careful planning or individual capability. As Geoffrey rides through the castle gates toward his royal obligations, he carries with him the confidence that comes from years of successful territorial development and the knowledge that his administrative systems can function effectively during his absence. The stone walls rising behind him represent more than defensive architecture. They embody a comprehensive approach to medieval governance that balances competing demands while creating sustainable institutions capable of adapting to changing circumstances. The morning mist that clings to the valley floor gradually lifts as Geoffrey's party moves through countryside that bears the marks of his successful lordship. Well-maintained roads facilitate travel and commerce. Prosperous villages demonstrate effective agricultural management, and the absence of fortified positions or suspicious activities indicates successful pacification of formerly hostile populations. The visible evidence of territorial development validates Geoffrey's administrative approach while creating legacies that will influence regional development long after his personal involvement concludes. The castle that Geoffrey leaves behind continues its daily routines under new leadership arrangements that demonstrate the institutional strength he has created during years of patient development. Lady Margaret assumes responsibilities that she has prepared for through gradual involvement in administrative activities, while Brother Benedict provides scholarly expertise and religious authority that legitimizes decisions made during Geoffrey's absence. The smooth transition to temporary governance validates the succession planning that characterizes effective medieval lordship. Within the castle walls, construction continues on the chapel that will serve future generations of worshippers while commemorating Geoffrey's commitment to spiritual as well as material development. Master Thomas supervises work that proceeds according to established schedules despite political changes, demonstrating how institutional momentum can maintain progress toward long-term objectives, even during periods of leadership transition. The chapel's completion will represent architectural achievement that outlasts individual reigns, while serving community needs that transcend particular political arrangements. The broader territory continues to function according to systems that Geoffrey has established during his years of careful development, with local administrators handling routine matters according to procedures that ensure consistency and effectiveness. Tax collection, legal proceedings, and commercial regulation proceed according to established precedents that create predictability and stability for subjects whose cooperation depends on confidence in governmental continuity. The institutional framework that Geoffrey has created demonstrates how individual leadership can establish lasting systems that serve community needs across generations. As weeks pass and news of the royal campaign reaches the castle, through merchant reports and official dispatches, the territory's inhabitants maintain their daily activities within frameworks that Geoffrey's leadership has established. Agricultural work follows seasonal rhythms that support both local needs and the surplus production required for tax obligations and commercial exchange. Craft production continues in workshops that serve local markets, while also contributing to trading relationships that connect the territory to broader European economic networks. The chapel nears completion as Master Thomas applies final touches to architectural details that will inspire devotion while demonstrating the community's prosperity and spiritual commitment. The building's consecration ceremony will mark not just religious achievement, but also cultural development that enhances the territory's prestige while providing enhanced spiritual services for all inhabitants. The chapel represents investment in community infrastructure that serves both immediate needs and longer-term development objectives. News of Geoffrey's successful participation in the royal campaign arrives through official messengers whose reports confirm his continued favour with King William, while describing military victories that strengthen Norman control over frontier territories. The successful completion of his feudal military obligations enhances Geoffrey's political position, while demonstrating his reliability as a royal vassal, whose loyalty can be trusted during future crises. His military service creates political capital that can be invested in securing additional privileges or territorial grants that expand his regional influence. The announcement of Geoffrey's imminent return triggers celebration preparations that demonstrate the community's attachment to their lord, while acknowledging the stability and prosperity that his leadership has provided. The Great Hall receives thorough cleaning and decoration for welcome feasts that will celebrate military success while reinforcing social relationships that bind the territory's diverse inhabitants together in networks of mutual obligation and support. The celebration preparations reveal the sophisticated social machinery that sustains medieval community life. Geoffrey's return journey through his territory reveals landscapes that have prospered during his absence, with evidence of continued agricultural development, commercial activity, and population growth that validate his administrative systems, while demonstrating the economic benefits of effective governance. The roads he travels remain secure and well-maintained, indicating successful preservation of civil order during his absence. Villages show signs of expansion and improvement that reflect continued confidence in territorial stability and future prosperity. The castle that comes into view as Geoffrey approaches home represents more than personal achievement or military necessity. It embodies a comprehensive vision of medieval civilization that balances security needs against economic development, individual authority against community welfare, and temporal concerns against spiritual obligations. The successful integration of these competing demands creates institutional frameworks that will influence European political development for centuries, while providing models for effective governance that transcend particular historical circumstances. The morning after Geoffrey's return brings a transformation in castle life, as the Lord's presence revitalizes administrative routines and social relationships that have maintained themselves during his absence. The Great Hall buzzes with activity as servants prepare for audiences with subjects who have waited weeks to present their concerns directly to their returned lord. Petitioners gather in the courtyard before dawn, their breath visible in the crisp autumn air as they organize themselves according to the subtle hierarchies that govern access to feudal authority. Geoffrey's first morning back reveals both the continuity and changes that have occurred during his military service with the Royal Army. Lady Margaret presents detailed reports of administrative decisions made in his absence, her careful records demonstrating the effectiveness of the delegation systems he established before departure. Tax collection has proceeded smoothly, legal disputes have been resolved according to established precedents, and commercial relationships have continued to generate revenue that supports the territory's ongoing development needs. The chapel stands completed, its stone walls rising elegantly within the castle's inner courtyard as Master Thomas presents the finished structure for Geoffrey's inspection. The morning light streaming through the coloured glass windows creates patterns of blue and gold that transform the interior space into something approaching the divine. Each architectural element reflects months of careful craftsmanship, from the carved capitals that crown the stone columns to the painted ceiling that depicts scenes from sacred scripture in vivid detail that would impress cathedral builders throughout Europe. Brother Benedict conducts Geoffrey through the chapel's features with obvious pride in the achievement that his supervision has made possible. The altar stone from Norman quarries has been properly consecrated with sacred relics, transforming ordinary marble into holy space blessed by divine presence. The wooden choir stalls demonstrate the skill of local carpenters whose work equals that found in major cathedrals, while the bronze candlesticks and silver vessels reflect the prosperity that Geoffrey's lordship has generated through years of effective territorial administration. The chapel's completion ceremony draws inhabitants from throughout Geoffrey's domain as peasants, merchants, craftsmen, and knights gather to witness the consecration that will provide their community with enhanced spiritual services. The local bishop arrives with appropriate ceremony, his presence legitimizing Geoffrey's authority while demonstrating church approval of territorial developments that have occurred under his leadership. The religious service includes prayers for continued prosperity and divine protection that acknowledge both temporal achievements and spiritual obligations underlying medieval lordship. During the consecration service, Geoffrey kneels before the altar in public demonstration of the humility and devotion that legitimates secular authority in medieval society. His participation in religious ceremonies communicates messages about proper relationships between earthly and divine authority, while reinforcing the moral foundations that justify feudal hierarchy. The visual spectacle of armed knights bowing in prayer alongside peasant farmers creates powerful symbols of social unity that transcend class distinctions through shared religious commitment. The feast following the chapel consecration provides opportunities for Geoffrey to reconnect with subjects whose loyalty has maintained territorial stability during his absence. Conversations during the meal reveal both accomplishments and challenges that have emerged while he fulfilled his military obligations to the crown. Agricultural harvests have exceeded expectations, generating surplus crops that can support population growth while providing additional tax revenue for future territorial development projects. However, the feast conversations also reveal emerging problems that require Geoffrey's immediate attention. Saxon raiders have increased their activities along the eastern borders, taking advantage of reduced garrison strength during his absence to test territorial defences and probe for weaknesses that might be exploited in larger attacks. Several wealthy merchants have requested increased protection for trade caravans, indicating that commercial routes face growing threats that could disrupt the economic relationships supporting territorial prosperity. The intelligence reports that Geoffrey reviews during his first week home reveal broader patterns of Saxon resistance that extend beyond simple raiding activities to encompass coordinated efforts to undermine Norman control throughout the region. Enemy scouts have been observed mapping roads and defensive positions, suggesting preparation for military operations that could threaten multiple territories simultaneously. The coordination of these activities indicates leadership and planning capabilities that exceed those of ordinary bandit groups, requiring responses that address strategic rather than merely tactical threats. Geoffrey's military advisors recommend immediate expansion of border patrols and strengthening of frontier fortifications to counter the increased Saxon threat. Master Ralph describes defensive improvements that could be implemented quickly using local resources and available manpower, while also identifying strategic positions where new outposts might provide early warning of enemy movements. The military planning reveals sophisticated understanding of territorial defense that integrates natural terrain features with artificial fortifications to create comprehensive protective systems. The economic implications of increased military spending create tensions between security needs and development objectives that characterize medieval administrative decision-making. Resources devoted to defensive preparations cannot be invested in agricultural improvements, commercial development, or infrastructure projects that generate long-term prosperity. Geoffrey must balance immediate security requirements against broader territorial objectives while ensuring that military expenses do not undermine the economic foundations that support his lordship. The steward's reports reveal how military spending affects different aspects of territorial administration, with increased costs for weapons, fortifications, and professional soldiers competing with ongoing expenses for construction projects, administrative salaries, and the hospitality obligations that maintain political relationships. The financial analysis demonstrates the complex economic calculations that underlie medieval governance, with every decision creating ripple effects that influence multiple aspects of territorial management. Geoffrey's solution to these competing demands involves expanding the economic activities that can generate additional revenue while simultaneously serving defensive purposes. New settlements along frontier areas can provide agricultural production and early warning capabilities, while establishing Norman presence in previously uncontrolled territories. Trading posts at strategic locations can generate commercial revenue while providing intelligence about enemy activities and civilian movements that might indicate preparation for attacks. The winter months provide opportunities for implementing these strategic initiatives, while also strengthening the social relationships that bind Geoffrey's territory together during periods of external threat. Extended residences by neighbouring nobles create opportunities for diplomatic discussions that could lead to mutual defence agreements or coordinated responses to Saxon resistance activities. The Great Hall becomes a centre for political networking that extends Geoffrey's influence while building alliances that enhance regional security. Lady Eleanor de Montfort, Geoffrey's niece who has recently arrived from Normandy, brings news of continental developments that could affect English political relationships. Her presence provides Geoffrey with direct connections to Norman court society, while also creating opportunities for marriage alliances that could strengthen his territorial position. The young woman's education and social skills make her a valuable addition to Geoffrey's household, particularly given her ability to conduct correspondence in Latin and her familiarity with the diplomatic protocols that govern relationships between major noble families. Lady Eleanor's integration into castle life demonstrates the importance of family networks in medieval political organisation, with relatives serving crucial roles in administration, diplomacy, and the social activities that maintain territorial cohesion. Her supervision of household activities relieves Lady Margaret of some responsibilities, while providing training in the administrative skills that noble women need to manage their own future territories. The mentoring relationship between the two women creates continuity of institutional knowledge while preparing the next generation for leadership responsibilities. The presence of educated women in Geoffrey's household reflects broader changes in medieval society that create expanded opportunities for female participation in administrative and cultural activities. Lady Eleanor's literacy and linguistic skills make her valuable for maintaining correspondence with religious institutions, continental relatives, and commercial partners whose cooperation supports territorial development. Her cultural sophistication enhances the castle's social prestige, while providing intellectual companionship that enriches Geoffrey's own understanding of political and economic developments throughout Europe. Spring's arrival brings renewed construction activity as Geoffrey implements the defensive improvements that Master Ralph has recommended for frontier security. New watchtowers rise at strategic locations throughout his territory, their positions carefully selected to provide overlapping observation coverage while offering secure communications between different defensive positions. The tower construction requires specialized engineering knowledge that Master William provides, drawing on his experience with military architecture to create structures that combine defensive capability with residential accommodation for permanent garrisons. The watchtower construction reveals the sophisticated logistics required for medieval building projects in remote locations, where transportation and supply challenges exceed those faced during castle construction. Materials must be transported over rough terrain using ox carts and pack animals, while skilled craftsmen must be persuaded to work in exposed positions where enemy attacks remain possible. The project coordination requires careful timing that ensures adequate security for workers while maintaining construction schedules that complete defensive improvements before seasonal campaign weather allows enemy forces to launch major attacks. Geoffrey's personal involvement in tower construction demonstrates the hands-on leadership style that characterizes effective medieval lordship, with nobles expected to understand technical details and practical challenges rather than simply issuing orders from comfortable positions. His presence at construction sites provides opportunities for direct communication with craftsmen and soldiers, while also demonstrating his commitment to territorial defense. The personal attention he provides to defensive preparations communicates priorities to his subjects, while building morale among those whose efforts create the security that protects the entire community. The completed watchtowers transform Geoffrey's defensive capabilities by providing early warning systems that can detect enemy movements hours before attacks reach populated areas. The strategic positioning of these installations creates overlapping observation zones that eliminate blind spots where enemies might approach undetected, while signal systems using horn calls and beacon fires enable rapid communication across distances that would require hours for mounted messengers to traverse. The defensive network represents sophisticated military engineering that integrates individual installations into comprehensive protective systems. The summer brings the first tests of these defensive improvements as Saxon raiding parties probe the enhanced border security while seeking vulnerabilities that might be exploited in larger attacks. The watchtower garrisons perform effectively, providing advance warning that allows Geoffrey's mobile forces to intercept raiders before they can reach target settlements. Several successful defensive actions demonstrate the effectiveness of strategic planning while building confidence among territorial inhabitants that their lord's preparations can protect them from external threats. The successful defense against Saxon raids generates intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions that inform broader strategic planning for territorial security. Captured raiders provide information about the organization and leadership of resistance movements, while examination of their equipment and tactics reveals the sophistication of enemy preparations. Geoffrey's interrogation techniques focus on gathering actionable intelligence rather than simple punishment, reflecting his understanding that information represents a more valuable resource than revenge against individual enemies. The intelligence gathered from defensive operations reveals disturbing patterns of Saxon coordination that suggest preparation for major military campaigns designed to challenge Norman control throughout the region. Enemy activities include recruitment of additional fighters, accumulation of weapons and supplies, and establishment of hidden supply depots that could support extended military operations. The scope of these preparations indicates strategic planning that exceeds local capabilities, suggesting coordination with Saxon nobles from other territories or even foreign powers seeking to exploit English internal divisions. Geoffrey's response to these intelligence revelations involves both military preparations and diplomatic initiatives designed to address the broader political conditions that enable Saxon resistance to flourish. Military preparations include expansion of his professional garrison and improvement of equipment and training that enhance combat effectiveness. Diplomatic initiatives focus on building alliances with neighbouring Norman lords whose cooperation could provide coordinated responses to threats that exceed individual territorial capabilities. The diplomatic efforts reveal the complex political relationships that govern medieval regional security, with individual lords balancing territorial autonomy against collective defense requirements. Some neighbors prefer independent action that preserves their freedom of maneuver, while others favor coordinated strategies that pool resources and expertise for maximum effectiveness. Geoffrey's challenge lies in building consensus among strong-willed nobles whose personal interests sometimes conflict with broader security objectives. Earl Robert's return visit provides opportunities for high-level strategic discussions that address regional security from royal perspectives that transcend individual territorial concerns. The Earl brings intelligence from court sources about broader Saxon resistance activities while seeking Geoffrey's assessment of local conditions and defensive capabilities. Their discussions reveal the multi-layered nature of medieval political analysis, with local intelligence informing royal policy while royal strategic perspectives guide territorial defensive planning. The strategic discussions result in coordinated planning for major military operations designed to eliminate Saxon resistance centres before they can launch the coordinated attacks that intelligence sources suggest are being planned. The operations will require cooperation between multiple Norman territories and substantial resource commitments that strain individual lordships while offering the possibility of eliminating threats that could otherwise destabilize the entire region. Geoffrey's participation demonstrates his integration into broader Norman strategic planning, while validating his reputation as a reliable military leader whose capabilities extend beyond territorial administration. The autumn harvest provides crucial resources for both territorial prosperity and military preparations, with surplus agricultural production supporting expanded military activities while demonstrating the economic foundations that justify feudal authority. The abundant crops reflect successful agricultural policies while providing supplies that can sustain extended military campaigns or siege operations. Geoffrey's management of harvest distribution balances immediate consumption needs against strategic reserves that enhance territorial security during uncertain times. The Harvest Festival celebrations provide opportunities for community gatherings that strengthen social bonds, while demonstrating the prosperity that effective governance has generated. Peasants from throughout Geoffrey's domain participate in ceremonies that acknowledge both agricultural success and divine favour, creating shared experiences that transcend class distinctions through common gratitude for material blessings. The festivals serve both social and political functions by reinforcing loyalty to Geoffrey's leadership, while celebrating achievements that validate his administrative effectiveness. During the harvest celebrations, Geoffrey announces his engagement to Lady Isabel de Clare, daughter of a prominent Norman family whose territorial holdings complement his own strategic interests. The marriage alliance will strengthen Geoffrey's political position while providing access to additional resources and military capabilities that enhance regional security. Lady Isabel's education and family connections make her an ideal partner for someone whose lordship requires sophisticated administrative and diplomatic skills, while her dowry includes valuable properties that expand Geoffrey's territorial base. The engagement announcement generates enthusiasm throughout Geoffrey's domain, as subjects recognize the political and economic benefits that the marriage alliance will provide for their community. The wedding preparations create opportunities for expanded trade and cultural exchange that demonstrate territorial prosperity while building relationships with Lady Isabel's family network. The celebration planning reveals the sophisticated social machinery that supports medieval political relationships through ceremonial activities that reinforce hierarchical bonds while creating shared experiences that strengthen community cohesion. As winter approaches and Geoffrey prepares for his wedding ceremony, the castle that has been his primary residence for years stands ready to welcome its new mistress while continuing to serve as the administrative centre for a territory that has grown in size, prosperity, and political importance. The stone walls that once represented primarily defensive necessity now enclose a complex community whose activities influence regional development while contributing to the broader evolution of medieval European civilization. The daily routines that fill Geoffrey's hours as lord of this territory continue to evolve as changing political circumstances create new challenges and opportunities that test his leadership capabilities while building institutional frameworks that will outlast his individual reign. His success in balancing competing demands while maintaining the loyalty and prosperity of his subjects demonstrates how individual achievement can contribute to broader historical developments that shape human society across centuries of political and social change. The wedding ceremony that will soon transform Geoffrey's personal circumstances represents more than individual happiness or political alliance. It embodies the continuing evolution of feudal relationships that adapt to changing conditions while preserving essential principles of mutual obligation and hierarchical organization. The celebration will draw participants from throughout Norman England, creating networks of relationship and obligation that strengthen the political foundations supporting medieval civilization, while demonstrating the cultural sophistication that justifies Norman claims to legitimate authority over conquered territories. The castle walls that witness these ceremonies will continue to shelter future generations whose lives unfold within institutional frameworks that Geoffrey and his contemporaries have established through years of patient development and careful leadership. The feudal system taking root within these stones represents humanity's ongoing effort to create social organization that balances individual ambition against collective welfare, military necessity against economic prosperity, and temporal authority against spiritual obligation in comprehensive frameworks that serve human needs across the generations that inherit and adapt the achievements of their predecessors. The wedding feast that celebrates Geoffrey's marriage to Lady Isabel transforms the Great Hall into a glittering showcase of Norman power and prosperity, with guests arriving from across England and Normandy to witness the union that will reshape political relationships throughout the region. The ceremony itself takes place in the newly consecrated chapel, where Brother Benedict performs the religious rites that sanctify the marriage, while Bishop Odo of Bayeux provides the ecclesiastical authority that legitimizes the political alliance. Lady Isabel's entrance, accompanied by a retinue of noble attendants whose silk gowns and jeweled ornaments demonstrate her family's wealth and status, creates a spectacle that reinforces the social hierarchies underlying feudal society. The marriage vows exchanged between Geoffrey and Lady Isabel reflect the complex nature of medieval noble unions, where personal affection must accommodate political necessity and individual desires serve broader family strategies. Their words, spoken in Norman French before an audience that includes representatives from the highest levels of English society, create legal and social bonds that extend far beyond the immediate couple to encompass their respective territories, vassals, and commercial interests. The religious ceremony transforms a political arrangement into sacred union, blessed by divine authority and witnessed by earthly powers whose approval validates the alliance's legitimacy. Lady Isabel's integration into castle life begins immediately following the wedding ceremony, as she assumes responsibilities that transform Geoffrey's household from a primarily military establishment into a more sophisticated centre of regional governance and cultural development. Her education in languages, music, and literature brings intellectual refinement that enhances the castle's prestige while providing practical skills for diplomatic correspondence and cultural activities that maintain relationships with noble families throughout Europe. Her dowry properties require administrative attention that expands Geoffrey's territorial responsibilities while providing additional resources for military and economic development. The wedding festivities continue for 3 days, with each day's activities serving different purposes in cementing political relationships and demonstrating territorial prosperity. The first day focuses on religious ceremonies and formal presentations that acknowledge the marriage's political significance. The second day features tournaments and martial displays that showcase military capabilities, while providing entertainment that reinforces warrior values central to Norman identity. The third day emphasizes cultural activities, including musical performances, poetry recitations, and scholarly discussions that demonstrate intellectual sophistication and artistic patronage. During the tournament competitions, Geoffrey's knights demonstrate the combat skills that form the foundation of feudal military effectiveness, while competing for prizes that reward excellence and build esprit de corps among the territorial garrison. The jousting matches reveal individual prowess, while the melee combats test unit coordination and tactical thinking that translate directly into battlefield effectiveness. Lady Isabel's presence as the tournament's presiding lady creates ceremonial focus that transforms military exercises into courtly entertainment while maintaining their essential function as combat training and readiness assessment. The cultural performances that conclude the wedding celebrations reveal the sophisticated artistic traditions that Norman nobles cultivate to demonstrate their legitimacy as inheritors of European civilization. Travelling minstrels perform epic poems that celebrate recent military victories while preserving historical memories that connect contemporary achievements to legendary precedents. The musical accompaniments to these performances require instruments and technical skills that reflect the economic prosperity necessary to support cultural refinement, while the audience's appreciation demonstrates educational sophistication that distinguishes noble society from simpler rural communities. Lady Isabel's first months as Geoffrey's wife involve learning the specific administrative procedures and social relationships that govern territorial management, while contributing her own expertise to governmental effectiveness. Her literacy in Latin provides access to legal documents and religious texts that inform policy decisions, while her familiarity with Norman court customs helps navigate diplomatic relationships that require careful attention to protocol and precedents. Her presence during audiences and court sessions adds ceremonial dignity while providing female perspectives on legal disputes and administrative challenges that affect women and families throughout the territory. The winter months following the wedding provide opportunities for Lady Isabel to establish her own household routines while building relationships with the diverse communities that inhabit Geoffrey's domain. Her supervision of textile production creates employment opportunities for skilled craftswomen while generating luxury goods that can be traded for imported items not produced locally. Her patronage of religious activities enhances the castle's spiritual life, while demonstrating piety that reinforces the moral foundations underlying feudal authority. Lady Isabel's involvement in charitable activities reveals the social welfare functions that noble households perform in medieval society, with surplus agricultural production and manufactured goods distributed to support widows, orphans, and other vulnerable community members whose survival depends on lordly generosity. Her personal attention to these activities creates bonds of gratitude and loyalty that supplement the military and economic relationships binding subjects to their feudal superiors. The charitable distributions also serve practical political purposes by demonstrating effective governance that serves community welfare rather than simply extracting resources for elite consumption. The spring of Geoffrey's first year of marriage brings new challenges as intelligence reports reveal increased Saxon military preparations that threaten to overwhelm individual territorial defences through coordinated attacks on multiple targets simultaneously. The enemy strategy appears designed to exploit the winter months, when Norman forces traditionally reduce their operational tempo, while the coordination of attacks across vast distances suggests leadership and communication capabilities that exceed previous Saxon resistance efforts. Geoffrey's response requires mobilization of resources that test both his military capabilities and the administrative systems that Lady Isabel has helped strengthen during her first months in residence. The military preparations reveal how marriage alliance has enhanced Geoffrey's strategic capabilities through access to Lady Isabel's family resources and connections. Her brother Sir William de Clare commands substantial military forces that can supplement Geoffrey's own troops during major operations, while her family's territorial positions provide strategic depth and alternative supply routes that improve operational flexibility. The marriage alliance creates mutual defence obligations that transform individual territorial security into coordinated regional strategy. Lady Isabel's participation in military planning demonstrates the practical skills that noble women develop to support their families' political and military activities. Her knowledge of supply management and logistics proves invaluable for planning extended campaigns that require coordination between multiple territories and diverse types of military units. Her diplomatic experience helps negotiate agreements between allied commanders, whose cooperation is essential for operational success. but whose personal relationships require careful management to prevent conflicts that could undermine military effectiveness. The coordinated response to Saxon threats involves unprecedented cooperation between Norman territories, as lords who normally guard their independence jealously agree to subordinate individual interests to collective security requirements. Geoffrey's role in organizing these cooperative efforts reflects his growing reputation as a military leader whose strategic thinking extends beyond narrow territorial concerns to encompass broader regional stability. His castle serves as a coordination center where intelligence is analyzed, strategies are developed, and resources are allocated according to comprehensive plans that address multiple threats simultaneously. The intelligence analysis conducted in Geoffrey's study reveals the sophisticated nature of Saxon resistance planning, with enemy activities including recruitment from multiple kingdoms, accumulation of siege equipment, and establishment of supply networks that could support major military operations lasting months, rather than the brief raids that have characterized previous resistance efforts. The scope of these preparations suggests coordination with foreign powers, who might exploit English internal conflicts to advance their own territorial ambitions, creating strategic complications that extend far beyond simple Saxon-Norman ethnic conflicts. Geoffrey's response to these intelligence revelations involves both military countermeasures and diplomatic initiatives designed to isolate Saxon resistance from potential foreign support, while building Norman unity that can withstand coordinated attacks. The military preparations include strengthening frontier defences, expanding professional garrisons, and improving communication systems that enable rapid response to threats developing anywhere within the Allied territorial network. The diplomatic efforts focus on building relationships with Saxon nobles who might be persuaded to abandon resistance in exchange for integration into Norman political structures. The diplomatic initiatives reveal Lady Isabel's particular value as a marriage partner, whose family connections and social skills provide access to political networks that might otherwise remain closed to Geoffrey's influence. Her ability to conduct confidential negotiations with Saxon women whose husbands control significant military resources creates opportunities for political settlements that avoid the devastating military campaigns that could destroy agricultural productivity and civilian populations throughout the affected regions. Her success in these delicate negotiations demonstrates how medieval women often serve crucial political functions despite their exclusion from formal governmental positions. The summer campaign season brings the anticipated Saxon attacks as coordinated forces strike multiple targets throughout the region in operations designed to overwhelm Norman defences through simultaneous pressure on widely separated positions. The enemy strategy initially achieves tactical success as several isolated outposts fall to surprise attacks, but the coordinated Norman response that Geoffrey has helped organise prevents the enemy from exploiting these early victories to achieve strategic breakthrough. The defensive operations test every aspect of the military and administrative systems that Geoffrey and his allies have developed during months of intensive preparation. Lady Isabel's role during the military crisis involves managing the castle's transformation into a regional command centre, where intelligence flows from throughout the affected area, while strategic decisions coordinate responses across multiple territories. Her organisational skills prove essential for maintaining communication systems that enable commanders separated by days of travel to coordinate their actions according to comprehensive strategies rather than simply reacting to immediate local threats. Her presence provides continuity of administration that allows Geoffrey to focus on military operations while ensuring that civilian governance continues to function effectively. The military operations reveal both the effectiveness of Norman tactical innovations and the persistent challenges posed by Saxon knowledge of local terrain and civilian support networks. Norman advantages in equipment, training, and coordination prove decisive in direct confrontations, but Saxon abilities to avoid pitched battles while striking at vulnerable economic targets create strategic problems that military victory alone cannot resolve. The campaign demonstrates how successful counterinsurgency requires political solutions that address the underlying causes of resistance rather than simply suppressing its military manifestations. Geoffrey's leadership during the crisis establishes his reputation as one of the most capable Norman commanders in England, while demonstrating the administrative and diplomatic skills that distinguish great lords from simple military leaders. His ability to coordinate complex operations involving multiple allied forces while maintaining effective territorial governance creates models for regional cooperation that influence Norman strategic thinking throughout the kingdom. His success validates the marriage alliance with Lady Isabel, while positioning him for greater responsibilities that could elevate his status within the broader Norman political hierarchy. The autumn harvest, following the successful military campaign, provides opportunities to assess both the immediate costs and longer-term implications of the Saxon resistance movement's defeat. Agricultural production has suffered from military disruptions, but the elimination of organized enemy forces creates conditions for economic recovery that could restore territorial prosperity within a few growing seasons. The capture of enemy leaders and the destruction of their supply networks has broken the organizational capabilities that enabled coordinated resistance. Though isolated groups continue to pose security challenges that require ongoing military attention, Lady Isabel's management of harvest distribution demonstrates how effective governance can transform military victory into lasting political success by ensuring that the burdens and benefits of war are shared equitably among different social groups. Her oversight of food supplies provides security for vulnerable populations while maintaining adequate reserves for potential future emergencies. Her attention to civilian needs during the difficult post-conflict period builds loyalty and support that strengthen the political foundations underlying Norman territorial control. The winter months provide opportunities for comprehensive assessment of the changes that military success has created in regional political relationships. Geoffrey's leadership during the crisis has earned recognition from King William himself, whose personal message acknowledges both military achievement and administrative competence that distinguishes Geoffrey among the Norman nobles establishing permanent control over English territories. The royal recognition creates opportunities for expanded responsibilities and territorial grants that could significantly enhance Geoffrey's political position and economic resources. Lady Isabel's pregnancy, announced during the winter celebrations, adds personal joy to political success, while creating new dynastic possibilities that will influence territorial inheritance and alliance strategies for the next generation. The prospect of an heir transforms Geoffrey's lordship from personal achievement into family enterprise that will require different types of planning and preparation. The pregnancy also enhances Lady Isabel's status within the household and broader noble society, acknowledging her successful fulfillment of marriage obligations while anticipating her future role as mother of the next generation of territorial leadership. The preparations for childbirth reveal the sophisticated medical knowledge and social support systems that medieval noble households developed to protect maternal and infant health during the dangerous process of medieval childbirth. Lady Isabel's chambers are prepared according to traditions that combine practical medical knowledge with religious rituals designed to invoke divine protection for both mother and child. The presence of experienced midwives and female attendants creates supportive environments that maximize survival chances while providing emotional comfort during the challenging months of pregnancy and delivery. The birth of Geoffrey's son during the spring of the following year creates celebrations that extend throughout the territory, as subjects recognize the dynastic continuity that ensures stable governance for the next generation. The infant's baptism in the castle chapel brings together representatives from throughout Norman England to witness ceremonies that acknowledge both personal achievement and political significance. Brother Benedict performs the religious rites that welcome the child into Christian community, while noble witnesses attest to legitimate birth that establishes inheritance rights and dynastic succession. The child's naming ceremony reveals the complex considerations that influence medieval noble identity formation, with the selection of William, honouring both King William and Geoffrey's father, while creating connections to royal authority and family tradition. The choice reflects strategic thinking about future political relationships, while acknowledging ancestral obligations that influence contemporary decision-making. The name creates expectations and opportunities that will shape the child's development, while positioning him within networks of relationship and obligation that define medieval political society. Lady Isabel's recovery from childbirth involves gradual resumption of administrative responsibilities, while adapting household routines to accommodate the demands of infant care. Her successful delivery enhances her status and influence within the castle community, while demonstrating the fulfillment of marriage obligations that justify her position as Geoffrey's partner in territorial governance. The presence of the heir creates new planning requirements that consider generational transition and inheritance strategies that will determine the territory's future development. The castle's daily routines adapt to accommodate the presence of the infant heir whose needs influence scheduling and security arrangements throughout the household. Wet nurses and attendants create support systems that ensure proper care while allowing Lady Isabel to maintain her governmental responsibilities. The nursery becomes a focus of household attention while serving practical functions that prepare for the child's eventual education and training in the skills necessary for future leadership. Geoffrey's morning routine now includes time spent with his son, whose development he monitors with the attention of someone who understands that effective lordship requires preparation that begins in infancy. The child's health and growth provide measures of divine favour and dynastic success that influence political relationships throughout the territory. Geoffrey's visible pride in his heir creates shared celebration that strengthens bonds between lord and subjects, while demonstrating the personal fulfillment that accompanies political achievement. The administrative challenges of managing an expanding territory while raising an heir require organizational innovations that delegate routine responsibilities while maintaining personal oversight of crucial decisions. Lady Isabel assumes increased authority over household management and local governance issues, freeing Geoffrey to focus on military and diplomatic activities that require his personal attention. The division of responsibilities creates more efficient administration while building Lady Isabel's experience and authority in preparation for potential future independent governance. The economic prosperity that follows military success creates opportunities for territorial development that enhance both immediate welfare and long-term strategic capabilities. New settlements expand agricultural production while providing security for frontier areas that were previously too dangerous for civilian occupation. Commercial development creates employment and revenue that support population growth while generating resources for continued military and infrastructure development. The economic expansion validates Geoffrey's governance while creating foundations for sustained prosperity that will benefit future generations. The summer brings visits from continental relatives, whose presence connects Geoffrey's family to broader European noble society, while providing intelligence about political developments that could affect English affairs. Lady Isabel's continental connections prove particularly valuable for maintaining relationships that transcend the Channel crossing, creating diplomatic and commercial opportunities that enhance territorial capabilities while positioning Geoffrey's family within international networks of alliance and obligation. The seasonal cycle of medieval lordship continues as Geoffrey balances military preparedness, administrative efficiency, economic development, and family responsibilities within comprehensive frameworks that serve multiple constituencies and objectives simultaneously. His success demonstrates how individual leadership can create institutional innovations that influence broader historical development, while building legacies that will outlast personal achievement to benefit successive generations of territorial inhabitants. The castle walls that shelter Geoffrey's growing family and expanding household continue to represent more than defensive architecture or personal residence. They embody evolving concepts of medieval civilization that integrate military necessity with economic prosperity, individual authority with community welfare, and temporal achievement with spiritual obligation in comprehensive approaches to human organization that will influence European development for centuries to come. The daily life unfolding within these walls creates precedents and establishes traditions that will guide future generations, while demonstrating humanity's ongoing effort to create social systems that balance competing demands in service of collective human flourishing. As the years pass, and Geoffrey's son grows from infant to young boy, learning his letters from Brother Benedict, the castle that began as mere stone and ambition has transformed into something far more enduring. The walls that once echoed only with the sounds of construction now resonate with the laughter of children, the scratch of quills on parchment, and the quiet conversations of a community that has found its rhythm in the dance between seasons of peace and preparation. The feudal system that Geoffrey helped establish has taken root not just in law and custom, but in the daily expectations of thousands who wake each morning knowing their place, their duties, and their protections within this carefully constructed world. From the peasant checking his fields at dawn to the knight maintaining his weapons in the armory, each person plays their part in a symphony of medieval life that will echo through generations yet unborn. These castle walls have witnessed the birth of more than just Geoffrey's heir. They have seen the birth of a new way of organizing human society that balances the need for security with the desire for prosperity, creating stability from the chaos of conquest. The stones that Master William laid with such care now shelter not just bodies, but an entire civilization that has learned to thrive within the embrace of feudal bonds. And as sleep takes you tonight, may you carry with you the quiet satisfaction of understanding how these mighty fortresses became not just monuments to power, but homes to the hopes and dreams of medieval Europe.